Alrighty. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Full Metal Cast. Here comes a big ugly one, right? We had another happening, another unfortunate and tragic event that took place on school grounds, and this time at a church when all kids were celebrating the Mass. And this tragic and devastating event, obviously, I need to acknowledge that, it was scary for the children, the parents alike. But it is also another unfortunate addition to the collection of these instances that sort of fit a certain pattern. However, I do want to highlight that this is another absolute fuck up by law enforcement and the state. This particular individual curated a digital footprint that would make mine and any of yours look like JV level, sort of Bush League. I know he or it, I'm going to refer to this thing as, and that's not nothing to do with the gender dysmorphia or identity of this individual. I've made it very clear that if you do what this thing did, you have sort of shed your humanity. You no longer acknowledge the natural rights of others, and you saw it was appropriate to go about removing people from this earth so that you could feel better, so that you can complete your purpose on this life. That's not a human quality. That's one of an animal. So you no longer have the privilege of being referred to as human. But beyond the Reddit posts, the online posts, the journal that it had, it posted a video leading up to the acts, up to like 2 hours, I think, before it actually took off to the school to begin the act. And that's 2 hours. A very long and detailed video with plans and schematics in which it was very clear what it was planning to do, where it was planning to do it, and nothing happened. This individual happened to reveal more about itself than any other school shooter that ever dragged its stomach across this earth, and all of this for the state and for law enforcement to do nothing. Now, is it possible they were too busy trying to corral brown people and stop people from burning flags, which I'll get into later? Who knows? Um, but again, what is the point in paying all these taxes and being subjected to laws that only make it harder for us to take responsibility for our own safety, only for the police and the state to fail every single time at stopping this from happening? And I brought this up before, but why do we simply accept the fact that we protect our money with more seriousness than we do our own children? And maybe that is a bad example after all, because that's not your money. Once it hits the bank, it's the bank's money. So they're absolutely going to protect it more. But regardless, and these are all sort of redundant questions, if you will, because, we sort of just accepted this and shrug our arms as a society like this is just fine and okay. But whenever this happens, I see people get up in arms about how do we let this happen? Why do we focus on X, Y, and Z from a legal standpoint instead of doing anything about this? And that's sort of that the onus belongs on everyone who just sort of accepts the status quo as it is and carries on without trying to change anything meaningfully. I'm not saying you're responsible for the acts of this sick animal, but we as a society do have to acknowledge that we put a higher emphasis on protecting material things and things that just aren't important, such as politicians, than we do our own children. And I think that's an attitude and a mindset that has to shift. I think we need to stop, and this isn't the be all end all solution. This is just a very small piece of a very large puzzle. But at some point, we have to realize we have an entire industrial complex designed just to protect politicians and their donors. And we don't even get to see a fraction of that. And our kids don't get to see any of it. That's a massive fucking problem. But circling back to the video that this jackass posted, there's no way that you could watch 30 seconds of it and pick any 30 seconds of the video and think, wow, guns are the problem here. And let's throw away the fact that this thing was confused about what gender it was. Any gender, race, religion, etc., swapped into this person holding that camera, it would not make a difference in the conclusion that I would draw or that anyone would draw if you were misfortunate enough to, view any portion of said video. Again, this was not a human. This was a sick fucking animal that needed to be put down. And unfortunately, what will go missed, thanks to the nature of government and politics in this lovely country, and forget the fact that the Epstein list now just got buried pretty fucking deep. And an argument could be made that that's probably fine considering the outcome of what just took place. We can put that on the shelf for now. We will not see any legitimate research into the now statistically significant trend of violence linked to the ideology, linked to the dysmorphia in this person's head. And this isn't to say that transgenderism is a disease. This isn't to say that it's bad. But considering, as from a sort of demographic makeup standpoint, the fact that quite a few of these that have happened in the past year or so have been carried out by an individual in that sort of camp is something I think to be looked at, to be studied. And just from a scientific, from a factual, from an objective standpoint, um, there's something very real there, obviously, that needs to be explained and made sense of. Because again, I think, trans rights are human rights and whatnot. Yes, sure, absolutely. But also, are we going about it the right way? Or is it just sort of a blank check to sort of, just let parents and kids just do whatever without any sort of controls? I don't know. But it will all just simply be boiled down to a trans rights, which will be on the left, versus gun rights, which will be on the right. And you better vote in the new upcoming most important election of our lifetime if you want your side to win, if you want to still be able to carry a gun, if you want to see trans people still have rights. You better vote. You better keep, fueling the political machine. Meanwhile, none of this will solve anything. Kids will still be just as unsafe as they are in schools and other gun-free zones, and you'll end up losing more rights in the end anyways. That's just how it works in this country. And already, after it happened, some fuck went on Fox News and said he's going to roll out an Israeli technology basically to make Minority Report a real thing in this country. It's going to be crime predicting AI technology built on software that our greatest ally built. And that is just the nature of government and politics here. Don't let a fucking tragedy go to waste. Stand on the lives of dead kids, stand on the bodies of the dead kids who you let this happen to, so that you can win some votes, that you can stay in office more, so that you can keep raking in contract money, kickbacks, and tax dollars alike. Fuck you. And this isn't some theory. This isn't something that hasn't happened before that I'm, taking a wild bet and guess on. History has proved that this is the outcome time and time again. If it didn't happen, in fact, this would be the outlier of that. And if we continue zooming out, further back from the video, looking at the shooter's motivation, um, you know, from all the things that were written on the magazines, I saw things in either Russian or Ukrainian. I saw things about politicians on there. I saw a very religious sentiment on there as well. I saw a very pro LGBT sentiment on there. I saw, I think there's a plenty of anti-Semitic sentiment on there as well. So it's a little bit mixed, sort of all throughout. That wasn't really too clear, but there were reports about the individual having cancer, I believe, and wanting to go out on their own terms. That sort of story, that narrative seemed to have made the round. And that would have been fine and well. If that thing just wanted to suck start its own shotgun, more power to you, as is your right. Do everyone a favor and just do that. But the fact that it went about taking others with it, may it die, and with you the memory of you, and let your family be cursed forever. All that being said, it does not mean we cannot learn from this. And for one, this is something that I have stood on when I've talked about, knowing your worth and going places where your worth and your rights are recognized, places where you are a soft target, schools, churches, etc. The time for conversations with leadership at these institutions where you or your loved ones attend was a long time ago. If you have not discussed or put into action plans to make said places harder targets, Get on it now or get out if you have any self-worth, right? And I've gotten into verbal jousts with my family about the church that they go to, and I just left it with God did not give you free will to just simply hope and pray what happened this week doesn't happen where you go, right? This kingdom of God, it's within you, as Tolstoy and many others have proclaimed. Act like it and protect, the sacred life that you have, which is just my way of wording my plea to a more Christian and Catholic crowd that clutches onto tradition for the sake of tradition. God bless them. But you are operating simply under the fact that if it hasn't happened yet, it's not going to happen to me, when that is simply not the reality of the matter. Do you think these kids in Minnesota went to school and to church thinking that was going to happen or afraid that that was going to happen? No, there's nothing stopping that from happening. Nothing. Because again, even if there were rules in place to stop it from happening that made that illegal, which, you think it's crazy. You think at some point a politician would come along and make murder illegal. Forget the fact that guns are already illegal on school grounds. That shouldn't have happened anyways, right? All that to say, rules don't stop shit for anyone who's already justified in their head that it's okay to kill children, to suit whatever narrative or, to meet the ends and the means in their own head. Laws don't mean anything to those people, right? So get with that, understand that, and take responsibility, right? Secure the outcome in your life that you want. It's not just gonna happen because you ignore it or you don't think about it or that you pray about it. I'm not saying don't pray, of course, but I forget which pope it was. It might have been Pope John Paul. But he said, religion should operate somewhat like an airplane with two wings. One wing being faith, absolutely have faith and practice your religion freely as you should. The other wing being reason, right? You can't stand on top of a building and say, because I pray to God and I believe that God is real, I will jump from this building and he will deliver me softly to the ground and I will not die. That's not how reality works. Sadly, that's just not how it's going to work. You have to do things within reason. And seeing what's happening in this country and knowing that laws and politicians and the police do not keep you safe, you have to keep you and your family safe. Act accordingly on that. Or you have to, in your mind, either remain completely ignorant or come to terms with the fact that it can happen to you because you and nobody else in your community wants to take responsibility to ensure a good positive outcome, for the long run. And that's just sort of my take on that. And the second thing you can sort of take away is this one, even more sort of further removed. This is more from a philosophical sort of, top view standpoint. But what a difference there is, and this difference should be studied in how this act was perceived versus the act of the assassination of the United Healthcare CEO. The former was unanimously rejected with disgust and the actor damned to be forgotten by time and history and his bloodline to be disgraced for all of eternity. Rightfully so. The latter, widely celebrated and the actor hailed as a hero. Why is that? Because in both cases, the shooters took the lives of unarmed targets who had families to go home to. But why do we see Luigi as a hero? Violence is not good. After all, it's a tool of the state and animals. And as Tolstoy proclaimed, it should only ever be used as a final last resort. And one might say that this is a case study on the thermometer of where we are as a society. And I can agree with that. But I also see this more so as a warning, a parable for those who seek to use violence as a means to achieve an end. And I would think, that both shooters in this example operated with a great deal of certainty that what they were doing in their own minds was right and that for the most part, people would celebrate their acts. I don't think they went out doing what they did in their heads thinking, I know this is wrong and that it's going to be, hated and that everyone's going to hate, no one's going to talk about me for it. And, they went out doing what they did because somewhere in their heads, they made the justification and they came to internalize the belief that what they were doing was right. They chose the targets that they did for very specific reasons. For one, it was to cleanse the world of fascists and religious extremists, quote unquote, who were genociding people based on gender. And for the other, it was to rid the world of a man responsible for immeasurable human suffering, who did so in the name of profit. Both saw themselves as bringers of justice or righteousness in their own sort of sick way. And yet the result was two very different perceptions after the fact. And again, like I said, I see this as a parable, as a warning to quote unquote revolutionaries, or those who glorify violence, because in everything that we do, when we set out to do it or say it, we are convinced that we are right. We don't really get to confirm that assumption with the court of public opinion until after the fact. And this is partly why I think Tolstoy rejected violence as a means to halt and revert the trend of government tyranny while living in Soviet Russia, because not only did he see it as an issue of morality, because again, violence, harming your fellow man is wrong, but also that it would most likely bring about a result opposite of what people wanted to achieve. For example, assassinate a political figure or bomb buildings that the state work out of. But ultimately, more restrictions may come from it, and tyranny may continue to rise. And people may also just sort of get a sick feeling when viewing the aftermath of violence as well. So I think the question is, when you decide to take up arms and sort of use violence as a means to an end, are you willing to sacrifice morality? Tax your soul and take a human life. Are you certain of the outcome of what it will bring in this life? And are you sure you are right? And I think that's a real thing to consider. I think that is, along with the morality question, are you sure that this is going to be perceived how you perceive it? And in a day with echo chambers as intense as they are, from mainstream media to just our own curated sick Instagram feeds, right? You will be able to confirm your internal monologue, your biases, easier than ever before. And you will get so much confirmation no matter where you go to get your news or your entertainment, that you will be able to confirm more and more extreme beliefs faster. And that's going to make it much harder to be, I think, quote unquote, right, or seen as appropriate in the eyes of others, because they're all doing the same thing too in their own particular flavor. And it becomes so niche and so extreme as you sort of go down that route, as those roots start to spread and get more and more narrow and further, that the court of public opinion is shrinking. And so it's very important, I think, to consider that when going about chasing after the thing that you're chasing after and how you're going to chase after it, because it's the likelihood of a majority agreeing with you and siding with you shrinks every day in that sense, I think. And I'm not really here to break down why that is any more than that. I think that it's something that we can learn from this tragedy, and maybe it's a really interesting and, a little bit touchy perspective of this tragedy, is that this sort of stands as proof that violence is a very, very touchy and fickle bitch when being employed as a means to an end. And I think it's only going to that trend is only going to continue as time carries on. One thing I'm going to end this topic on, and this one really, really is sticking out to me, and it applies to both sides of the political aisle. But to the people focusing strictly on the fact that "Kill Donald Trump" was written on the mags of the shooter, go fuck yourself. The people making this persecution of Christians thing just as much. The people making it a trans thing or take the guns away thing, go fuck yourself too. It's time to start thinking much bigger. All of you sound like the same politicians slithering about and coming in to pick the bones and capitalize on a tragedy to gain political clout and stay in office a little longer. That mentality will only bring more about what we're getting now, and it'll just make things worse for the non-political class. Thinking bigger means recognizing that this is a human issue. There's no need to dumb it down and make it a red versus blue, a right versus left, a trans versus straight, a pro-gun versus anti-gun thing. It's time to grow up a little bit, right? To say guns are the problem, that is just as shallow of thinking as the statement trans people are a problem, right? Because if you go about saying, oh, well, a gun was used in the shooting, if guns were banned, if guns were legal in this country, it wouldn't have happened. I take guns out of that statement and put trans in that statement, it's just as true. It makes no difference because if trans people were banned. If it didn't exist, there wouldn't have been one to carry out the shooting. Duh. No, it's time to start thinking a little bit fucking bigger. It's time to start meeting on common ground with this stuff because the common ground isn't as specific, it's not as shallow as just looking at what happened and picking the first thing that is like the hot topic of it: guns, trans people in this case. And that's going to be the political wedge that's driven here, to take away more rights, to install a surveillance state, to make this country even worse than what the government has already made it. um, it's time to realize and time to start focusing on, why is this happening? Why is this happening? How do we stop it? Because neither taking away guns or trans people is going to stop it. That's just the reality of the matter. When it comes to a shooting like this, yelling the loudest, trying to convince people that this country has a problem with persecuting Christians and Republicans, you're only going to create further division. Same with the talking points on the other side. You're not meeting people on common ground and acknowledging that this is a human issue, not just experienced by and limited to a couple of groups of people that you happen to identify with and vote like. Yes, again, you can say that there is a notable trend as of late with the background/motive of this shooter and the ones who came before it, and even some similarities in their targets, but it is still too narrow of a view to just go, the left radicalizes people into killing Republicans and Christians. It's no different than those on the left going, guns are the problem, or we really ban cell phones in schools before we ban guns, ? No, these two seemingly opposing sides, they're one and the fucking same. Neither are going to address the underlying issue. Neither will promote and ensure safety for that which is most precious, which are our children, the future generation in this case. They're both simply feel-good, virtue-signaling talking points to push for meaningless political wins, to stroke each side's fucking ego, whether they're conscious of it or not. And if you take either of those sides screaming at each other those talking points and let the situation run to the extreme where each side gets exactly what they want, again, you do not get the desired outcomes in either scenario. Both outcomes result in loss of freedoms, whether that be freedom of speech, privacy, or right to bear arms, or even freedom to be and marry whoever you want to be and marry with. Whereas the alternative that I try to find in any setting, and the alternative that all anarchists, freedom absolutists, and real libertarians alike will seek, is a solution in which the state gets out of the fucking way and stops fucking with everything in our daily lives so that we can go about caring for ourselves and our communities in a way that we deem acceptable and with consent. One reason why I do not attend Mass is because churches are designed like shooting galleries and are one of the places in which you are not allowed to carry, and there's a caveat there, at least in my state, without permission. If you have permission from the head pastor, you can in this state. I would, however, gladly stand outside of a church, a mosque, or whatever, to protect those who wish to practice their freedom of religion. I could not think of a more righteous way to spend my time. Same with schools in my area. To have the opportunity to protect the children inside and ensure they are safe is no doubt doing a better job than what law enforcement is doing now. And it's a pretty fucking cool prospect. All of this would have to be, agreed to by communities, the schoolgoers, the staff, the parents, and whatnot, again, because consent is the primary focal point. But that is the point. People get to make the choice and not the state. That is absolute freedom. And in this scenario, it doesn't bring any more danger, right? Freedom usually does actually guarantee danger, that's just the nature of it. But in this scenario, it actually guarantees more safety than what we already are experiencing now. And that's just one example. That's just one facet, one angle to look at this whole thing. But to recap, this whole thing is another spectacular failure, and only more insanity will ensue if we continue looking to the state for solutions. You and only you are responsible for your safety. It is about nothing else. A lot of narratives are getting thrown around, some objectively true, but all are just emotionally stirring and nothing else. The fact is that evil will employ wanton violence as a means to an end, and you have to be willing to meet it, that being evil, on a field of its choosing and snuff it out with the very tool it seeks to use against you, violence. You know your worth, and you know that your family is worth more than anything on earth. Do not leave your safety to people who only see you as votes and tax cattle. Period. That's my view. It's not Republican. It's not fucking Democrat. It's black flag. It's I want to do what I need to do to keep my friends and family safe. I know I'm more equipped than law enforcement and the state clearly in stopping this thing and stopping these things, as they have failed to stop every single one of them throughout history. And this asshole, this thing that carried out the most recent one, left a trail of breadcrumbs leading up to 2 hours before the event, where the location, the plans, the schematic, his intent were so fucking clear, and they did nothing. I'm done talking right and left, red and blue, straight and trans, guns and no guns. I'm done with that. And you have to be done with that too if you want anything to fucking change, because it's not. And you can say, oh, well, if we just do this, then this will happen. And I will say, how long have we been voting for now? How long has America been a country now? And you are now up to this point, and you're going to tell me that one more election, one more year is going to make a difference. One more thing that has to do with this political machine that has put us at the very point we are now is going to change it for the better, even though everything it has ever done has led us to this exact point now. And the trend has not been a positive trend. Throughout history, it has not been a positive trend. I'm going to leave it at that. Because I can rant and scream and rage about this all day long. It's something I'm very passionate about. It's something that drives me up the wall. And I've done several episodes on it, so I won't, for the sake of the two people listening, I won't waste any more of your time on me just sort of aimlessly screaming about things into the void about that. But in a somewhat similar vein, you know, this is this is a new topic, okay? Um, in a somewhat similar vein, what are we training for? You know, and this goes back to, you know, how so many of us have not even considered putting water on our kit, right? It's why so many of us started getting in this space. Uh, you know, why we didn't think about medical to begin with and basic first aid. Excuse me. We get caught up in, you know, a shit hitting the fan scenario mindset when it comes to acquiring kit and training, and I'm guilty of it too, as I think we all are. Um, and while, you know, the topic of water on kit specifically sent me down this rabbit hole, a scenario presented itself in my day to day that caused me to pause and sort of reflect on this whole question. You know, what are we training for? You know, when do we step in? When do we get involved? And the scenario goes something like, you know, a woman who attends my gym. She has a middle school age son. She is separated from his father. Definitely not a clean break, as there is a restraining order in play, and there have been a few days when the police have been called to the gym, as he has shown up when he was not supposed to. But anyways, one day she had her son sit inside the gym during one of our classes, and this really isn't a new occurrence. Sometimes she would have him sort of stay inside rather than the lobby to avoid his father showing up and interacting with him when he would know that she would be unavailable and in class. But on this particular day, her son was very clearly upset about something. He was on the verge of tears, and he was sort of arguing and pleading with her, you know, about something. And eventually, she had explained to some of us that, you know, he was upset because he wanted to go to football practice, but she wouldn't let him go this particular day because I guess earlier in the week, his father showed up multiple times, you know, again, when she was at the gym and not able to sort of be there. And he would yell awful things about her, about him, and to him while he was practicing. And most people um, would sort of look at this and go, that's awful, terrible, obviously, but not my monkeys, not my circus. And that sort of would be the extent of that. You sort of wash your hands of the issue and hope for the best and just sort of walk away. And that's sort of what I did, but I wrestled with that and struggled with this for some time, because as someone who trains and is also a very loud voice for for individuals protecting and helping those in their community, like I just talked about, really, how can I just say good luck with that and sort of continue on doing what I'm doing? And while I still think of a way to respectfully bring up the subject and offer assistance, I do firmly believe it is on good, capable people to stand up and protect those who can't, but who also ask for it. Again, consent being the main driver in all of this. If they choose to not accept it, then so be it. You offered your help, you offered your assistance, and they said fuck off. That's their choice. So be it. But if a child is suffering because of the actions of an adult acting out of pure malice, is it not just to stand up and offer assistance? And what I'm not saying is I'm trying to make this dude disappear, but to show up and support the son during practice and then maybe delicately discourage the gentleman from showing up where he shouldn't and saying things that he shouldn't wouldn't be something that's so unrealistic or hard to do, I feel, especially if, you show up, conduct yourself professionally and respectfully, and maybe you have a few other of your motivated friends with you, it shouldn't be too hard to achieve. Um, and obviously, this is a tense scenario with plenty of opportunities to go south very quickly and get legal very quickly. But even so, what is the point of preparing to fight a revolutionary war with a tyrannical government, or to murk the home intruder or mass shooter, if we can't even stand up for kids in our neighborhoods so that they can play sports with their friends? I think that's a valid question. Like, what's the point in this? What are we doing? Right? Like, why can't we do like a yes and thing with this? And I'm so vocal about taking responsibility for your safety and the safety of your community because I know voting does not work. I know outsourcing anything that has to do with your well being rarely ever works, but you can see the fruits of your labor in your community when you step in and you step up and help those who need and ask for your help. That is a direct input output. You get to see that. You get to see that kid enjoying his practice. You get to see his mother be able to take care of herself and enjoy her time at the gym like she should. That is, by definition, controlling your controllables. And we, to varying degrees, of course, have the ability to make an impact in the immediate area around us, and we should strive to do so responsibly and in a moral manner that respects the natural rights of all people, of course. And again, like I said, yes, and two things can be true. You can do all that you do in this space because you know the trend all governments follow, and in this case, you can also make parks a comfortable place for kids in your neighborhood. Aim big, of course, right? Arm yourself and be deadly, get night vision, etc. But also don't neglect the little things, well, quote unquote, the little things, right? Those who live with and next to you. The world can be going to shit, but you can help make your community the exception. And that sort of feeds into two quotes that have popped up into my algorithm as of late. And these keep showing up. I don't know why. But the first one is, the life of a dragon slayer is a lonely existence, especially with dragons being bigger than they have ever been. This sort of means like existence and the state of the world seems like an insurmountable uphill battle for a lot of us. A lot of days are just a drag. You are just pulling yourself through and fighting for every second, it seems like, to get out of bed and go to work, eat right, go to the gym. And the other quote, never feel sorry for raising dragon slayers in a time where there are actual dragons. So why should you be discouraged if you are here now training and preparing? Do the work, no matter how small. A win is a win. No matter how great the odds may seem against you, with how expensive things are, with how many freedoms are on the chopping block, it seems, every single day, how close we are to disaster and collapse, why should you be discouraged? Why should you let all those things get you down when you have taken it upon yourself to prepare and train for these exact things? Why should you be surprised when an opportunity starts to present itself that you happen to be very well equipped for or are equipping yourself for? Do the work, and a win is a win, no matter how small. And the last topic, a spicy one, a fun one, an interesting one. Um, Flag burning laws. Another shitty distraction, of course. But valid question. Does this fix inflation? The housing markets, the quote unquote crime problem in the cities where National Guard is showing up? Does this like stop or resolve the two major wars we are funding? It certainly didn't stop what happened in Minnesota. And I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say that everyone would say that that is way more important than this. And first of all, the call to make it illegal or to sick the federal government on those who burn the American flag only came after the backlash for making it illegal to burn the Israeli flag first. To put that into context, the MAGA, the quote unquote America First president, made it illegal to burn the flag of Israel before he made it illegal to burn the American flag. One, treason. Two, pussy shit. And also, flag code, sort of fundamentals. The American flag doesn't even like bow to others during the presentation of colors or for national anthems if you watch. But up until this proclamation, you could burn it and it was still fine. And that's all fine and dandy, right? Like, I think you should have the right to burn whatever the fuck you want, honestly, as long as you're not hurting anybody or the belongings of anybody, really. But to make another country's flag illegal to burn before you make your own is certainly a statement. And if you value freedom or free speech at all, this is a problem regardless of what flag we're talking about. If you want, as I said, if you want to burn a flag, that's totally not immoral. That's totally fine. Objectively, there's nothing wrong with that. If you live in a free country, that is not a problem. Now, I'm not saying I'm itching to start lighting up flags in my backyard, though I may be a little more now so, considering the landscape. But for the federal government to proclaim that they will come after you for burning symbols that they can just randomly pick out of the air, you don't live in a free country. You do not have freedom. You have permissions, like I've said, and your permission to burn flags is suddenly diminished. It's suddenly shrunk quite a bit, it would seem. And the lack of outrage from the right. And I'm going to say this. If your candidate gets in, you should be harder on them than the opposing side. If you're Republican and your Republican candidate becomes president, you should be 10 times harder on them and more critical of them than if the Democrat was in. Because the Democrat's not going to listen to you anyways, right? That's why you're not voting for him, because he's not going to do what you want to do anyways. If your boy gets in there, you'd want him to do the right thing by you. And if he's not, you should be very vocal about that. But politics is just like work. There's a completely different set of rules. There's a completely different reality that one must exist in if you want to partake in politics, if you want to be political, if you want to vote and have any sort of faith in the system. And that's why it's all made up and stupid and gay, and why I just stay away from it, because it's all just, it's monopoly money, it's nonsense, it's bullshit. It's the exact same that, and the main proof of that is, one, maybe Trump is not standing up and saying, "Whoa, that's not really pro freedom or America first objectively," but the whole Epstein thing serves as perfect proof. How the cries were so great for it forever, how he didn't kill himself, how find Maxwell guilty, all this stuff, show us the black book, release the black book, show us the list, show us the files, put the pedophiles in the wood chipper, how all that sort of got quiet now. As soon as Trump got in and said it doesn't exist, it's not real, despite his staff saying that they have seen so many hours of footage and proof and all the evidence they collected from his New York apartment. Despite Trump having more pictures with the man than I do with my own grandparents, despite all of this, all of the proof that has been made publicly available even before Trump ran on releasing the files, these people now just pretend it doesn't exist and that it's a hoax made up by the left. It's made up. It's not real. It's not reality. It does not exist in objectivity and truth. And so therefore I do not play. I do not partake. But yeah, the flag burning thing is what's the point, right? What are we doing here? It doesn't achieve anything. It doesn't fix anything. Another sick, stupid, retarded political distraction. one. And two, I actually saw something that may look into here. Let's see if it gets any traction on social media. But I heard there was a nice sort of national flag burning planned for 9/11. And it wasn't the American flag they were planning on burning, although that may have changed now. But keep your eyes out for that. That may be a very spicy and interesting day coming up this new month. But yeah, we got a little carried away this episode. I realized during the very touchy topic up front. I also did some dueling in some of the comments that I'm not too proud of on Instagram for a lot of the really shitty groups that decided to jump in on this and make it about them and their cause. Moms Demand Action, that fuck from Minnesota who went on and shit on Thoughts and Prayers and then immediately went to work trying to ban guns and assault weapons so that he can make a name for himself politically, knowing damn well it won't do anything to keep the kids safe. Yeah, fuck all those people, all those grifters, left, right, Catholic or not, you know who they are. Trying to make it about themselves and not actually change anything for the better. Yeah, beware of those. Those people are just as wicked as the politicians. They're not as bad as a shooter, obviously, but I look at them with extreme disdain. Because they're no different than the politicians who come in to sort of stand on the bodies to, make a profit and a name and a benefit for themselves and themselves alone. They're not your friends, no matter how similar and how alike they may seem to you. They're the ones causing so much harm to this country, and should be viewed no different than the United Healthcare CEO or politicians or all their donors or all the big tech or the AI guys. Yeah, that's been this one in particular. Really brought a lot of those people out of the woodwork, it seemed. And that was it was very interesting. But again, every time I think a good talking point to bring up, and I'm going to circle back and sort of end on this, when it comes to these mass shootings, the school shootings, gun violence, whatever it is, saying we have a gun problem is no different than saying we have an X problem and attach whatever race or gender or religion to the person holding the gun. It's just as shallow and as aimless and as empty of a claim as far as diagnosing the real problem. It's just as meaningless and baseless. So every time you hear someone say we have a gun problem, hit them with we have a trans problem, hit them with we have a whatever problem, right? It's the logic is exactly the same, and it misses the underlying tones, the underlying factors of what one is driving these people to target the places that they do. And I've spoken about that. But also what in the fuck is driving these people to take the lives of children? Why? Why specifically children? And that may be a correlation to where they're doing this and the nature of the places that make where the kids go such easy and appealing targets for these sick fucks. But if we're just going to sit here and point fingers at guns or at trans people or at black people or at immigrants or whatever, you're not going to change anything, man. There are people who sort of set this table, who sort of set this landscape, and you need to be aiming everything at them. All of your words, your thoughts, you need to be gunning for their throats, and you better force them to start changing things, or else nothing meaningful is gonna change for the better here. It's only gonna get worse. Because the same people who cried for gun control, the same people who cried for, banning transgenderism in schools, you both just brought about Minority Report. You brought about Israeli AI that is going to make Minority Report a real thing in this country. Congrats. You didn't do anything that's going to stop this. You didn't do anything that made anything better for the rest of us. This is the outcome. This is the political quote unquote solution to a political problem that's only going to create more and worse political problems and make life harder to live for the rest of us. That's the reality of it. So that sucks to end that one on, I realize. But that's just the cycle of insanity that we exist in this country when we continue to believe in and rely on political solutions to the very problems that politics and politicians created for us. Plain and simple. That being said, do something in your community. and it doesn't have to be something with a gun. It could just be, and I saw this was a great one. Actually, one of the followers, he's obviously a churchgoer, practices regularly. He was saying, you don't have to jump to armed guards at your church. You yourself can just become an usher, a greeter. That puts you right, at step one. You become familiar with the regulars and the families and the faces. You see people who may be shady actors coming in or newcomers coming in that you don't recognize. And that at least puts a responsible individual and citizen, or civilian rather, right up front and able to intervene, interfere right, at the start of it versus not having them at all, right? That's like a very simple and basic thing. But again, going back to what are we training for, right? It doesn't have to be straight to Civil War, Revolutionary War for you to say, all right, I'm going to get involved now. No, don't do that. Get involved today. Make your community the exception to this insane political world that we live in, Community garden, making sure the park is safe, making sure everyone, is, happy and safe and, it's a good environment. That's what you're really training for, right? What's the point of all of this? Why go through all of this and do what we do to just let it sort of slip away? If we can step in and make a little change and get the little wins now in our own backyards, that's where it counts. Get to know your pastor at your church if you are a churchgoer, right? Do what I just obviously brought up if you feel so inclined to do. But you can control the impact. Your ballot won't, your vote won't. Only you get to control the impact. And I think it's a positive takeaway. You can do this stuff. You can just ask people questions and you can ask them for things. And the worst they can say is no. You'd be surprised if you just started asking questions and had a conversation and asked for things and sort of made, your opinions or beliefs and, your side of the argument known. This isn't saying I want to bring a gun somewhere I can't bring a gun, but it's just life in general. You get pretty far just by going back and forth with people. And that may be a porch talk sort of thing that I brought up last week. But I also do think there's something to be said that doesn't really happen a whole lot today with how sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Broken out society is, how sort of people have put themselves in their own icebergs a little bit, their own echo chambers. So yeah, I think that also plays on, we have more alike than we do not. So go out, do that, be the change in your community. Don't count on a vote. Don't count on a politician or anyone else to do it. You can do it. And a little win is a win, and it should be celebrated just as much as buying a rifle or, doing well on a course or going to take a really cool course, or a few courses at the end of September at HTA Range Day. Shameless plug. Yeah, I'm gonna end it on that because I can keep thinking of new threads and new things to talk about as it relates to this terrible thing that happened. But fuck the grifters, man. Fuck them all. There's no reason to make it about you. Nothing's gonna get done that way, baby. And if you find yourself falling into that, just take a step back and know it's not really about you or your political or your religious or your gender ideology. It does not matter. It's not about that. It's a human issue. Meet people on common ground and be the positive change, the positive reinforcement, the positive sort of light in your communities, because what's the point in all this if you're not? Stay metal.